In the opening days of Operation Desert Storm, as the world watched precision airstrikes ripple across Baghdad, a quieter and far more discreet operation was already underway, one that never appeared in televised briefings or coalition press releases. Few outside the chain of command knew that small, specially assembled teams from Delta Force and the UK's 22nd Special Air Service Regiment had been ordered to slip behind enemy lines. Their mission: track elusive Iraqi Scud launchers that threatened regional stability and, at times, the political cohesion of the coalition itself.
It was a task shadowed by uncertainty, sparse intelligence, and the unspoken knowledge that if compromised, these men would be far beyond the reach of immediate rescue.
The challenge facing these covert units was immense. Scud launchers were mobile, camouflaged, and often sheltered within makeshift hiding positions, scattered across western Iraq and along the Kuwaiti border. Satellites provided only fleeting imagery due to orbital timing and weather interference, leaving ground teams to fill the gaps. For Delta operators accustomed to hostage rescues and counter-terror missions, the environment felt unusually vast and unpredictable, an empty desert where the slightest movement could betray their presence. One operator later recalled in an unofficial interview, "You weren't fighting people, you were fighting the terrain, the silence, and the clock." To understand why these men were sent so deep into Iraqi territory, one must look at the broader strategic anxieties of January 1991. Iraqi Scud attacks on Israel risked fracturing the fragile coalition of Arab states aligned with the US-led mission. Washington feared that Israel, pushed too far by repeated missile strikes, would retaliate, forcing Arab partners to abandon the coalition. That risk placed extraordinary pressure on US Central Command to eliminate the Scud threat by any means necessary. Declassified notes from CENTCOM planners reveal that conventional aircraft struggled to locate mobile launchers in Iraq's western deserts. "We need eyes on the ground," one handwritten margin note reads, preferably eyes that won't be seen. Thus, Delta Force teams, joined in coordination with SAS elements, were inserted by helicopter deep into Iraqi territory. Their landing zones were chosen for remoteness, often miles from any confirmed enemy activity, yet the danger remained palpable. Every movement required meticulous planning: desert navigation by starlight, sand-colored ghillie nets draped over vehicles, and strict radio silence unless movement was detected. Operators carried AN/PVS-7 night vision goggles, M4 carbines with sound suppressors, and small laser designators meant to guide airstrikes if they could find anything worth striking. One Delta patrol, operating near the rugged outskirts of Al-Qaim, reported spotting faint vehicle tracks leading into a concealed wadi system. Intelligence analysts believed this region could serve as a launch corridor for modified Scud variants, thanks to its natural protection from aerial surveillance. Yet in official logs, entries related to this team abruptly stop for several hours. Historians still puzzle over the silence. Some veterans suggest the team may have gone completely dark to avoid triangulation. Others believe the records were intentionally suppressed due to the sensitive nature of their findings. Tension mounted daily. Sandstorms rolled in without warning, erasing tracks and limiting visibility. Iraqi listening posts scanned for unusual radio activity, forcing teams to shorten transmissions to mere seconds. In rare cases, patrols observed Iraqi convoys moving at night, headlights off, engines muffled, raising speculation that the Iraqis were actively relocating launchers based on coalition flight patterns. One SAS liaison later wrote in his notebook, "They were hiding something. The question was how much they knew about us." The broader lesson from these early covert efforts is one still studied today: the limitations of technology in vast, hostile environments. Despite satellites, aircraft, and electronic sensors, the coalition still relied on small groups of highly trained individuals, willing to move quietly and think independently. Their presence on the ground forced Iraqi units to adapt, sometimes relocating launchers prematurely or abandoning suspected positions, actions that indirectly reduced Scud launches without a single shot fired. Yet the cost of secrecy was high. Families of these operators received no updates. Their missions were not acknowledged in command briefings. Even within coalition headquarters, only a handful of officers knew the team's exact locations. What they found, or failed to find, during these first covert sorties remains partly obscured by redacted documents and unspoken memories. As the first week of Desert Storm unfolded, these initial infiltrations set the stage for a pattern of operations that blurred the line between reconnaissance and direct action. And while some intelligence would eventually make its way to aircrews hunting launchers from above, many details remained locked inside unfiled mission notes and vague references in radio transcripts. What happened next, as teams pushed deeper into Iraq's western frontier, would raise even more questions still debated by historians today. As coalition aircraft dominated the skies over Iraq, another war was being fought far below, one measured not in airstrikes, but in silence, uncertainty, and the shifting lines of Iraqi sand. Among the most critical of these hidden operations was the Delta Force reconnaissance mission near Al-Qaim, a region long suspected of hosting concealed Iraqi Scud launchers. The hook came quietly. Several early launch trajectories suggested that mobile platforms originated from this remote corner of western Iraq, beyond the reach of most coalition patrols. If even one launcher remained undetected, it could provoke another strike against Israel, threatening the fragile unity of the coalition. That possibility drew U.S. Central Command to take unparalleled risks. For the Delta operators deployed into this sector, the struggle began the moment their MH-47 helicopter lifted off the desert floor, its rotor wash erasing their landing marks within seconds. Equipped with M4 carbines, thermal optics, GPS prototypes, and desert survival gear, the team moved under total radio silence. Their objective was precise but brutally difficult: locate concealed Scud systems that Iraqi units could move, launch, and hide within hours. The environment worked against them. The desert near Al-Qaim was not flat, but carved with wadis, rock shelves, and abandoned industrial routes from the Iran-Iraq War. Each natural depression offered space to hide a launcher, making the search area vast and unnervingly silent. Historical context deepens the weight on their shoulders. Coalition intelligence knew that Iraqi engineers had become adept at camouflage, often disguising launchers beneath tarps painted to resemble quarry stone, or scattering debris to mimic abandoned construction sites. A declassified CENTCOM cable from January 21st noted, "Mobility makes the Scud threat exponentially more difficult than anticipated." One Delta operator later mentioned in a personal diary entry, "The worst part wasn't not seeing anything. It was knowing that something might be watching us instead." Their mission was, at its core, a race against Iraqi concealment tactics. 3 days into their reconnaissance sweep, the team intercepted faint signs that suggested Iraqi military movement: partially buried tire tracks, scraps of wiring, and a disturbed sand berm that could indicate a hastily repositioned vehicle. Such findings were small but significant, breadcrumbs that hinted at something larger. Yet within the mission logs, the entries documenting these discoveries abruptly stop. Officially, the gap was attributed to transmission complications due to atmospheric interference, but historians reviewing the declassified materials noticed that the blank period aligned with the same night coalition aircraft reported unusual radar reflections near Al-Qaim, prompting speculation that a launcher may have been prepared and then relocated before an airstrike could be called in. The reveal came only later, in veteran testimonies. Several operators hinted at a tense encounter that remains absent from the public record. One remarked in an interview, "We heard engines, more than one, maybe 3. Another implied that the team was forced to take cover in a shallow ravine as an Iraqi convoy passed mere meters away. Whether these were support vehicles or an actual Scud convoy remains uncertain, but the implications are striking. If the team's presence coincided with Iraqi movement, the Iraqis may have been conducting rapid deception operations, constantly shifting their launch positions to confuse coalition detection efforts. Such ambiguity offers a modern lesson in the limitations of battlefield intelligence. Even with advanced surveillance tools, success depended heavily on human interpretation, patience, and intuition. Technology could monitor large regions, but it could not read subtle environmental cues or listen for distant engines in the cold desert night.
The Al-Qaim mission underscored how, in the age of satellites and precision-guided weapons, some of the most crucial intelligence still came from operators on the ground, navigating by stars and trusting their instincts. The emotional toll on the men was equally profound.
Days passed in isolation, with only short-burst radio contact approved under strict encryption. Each message had to be concise: coordinates, observation details, weather. Nothing personal. Sandstorms rolled across the region, reducing visibility to a few feet and forcing operators to shelter beneath camouflage nets while listening to static on their radios. They did not know whether Iraqi patrols were nearby or if their movements had been detected. "There's a special kind of fear when the wind is so loud you can't hear yourself breathe," one veteran recalled. "You start wondering what else that noise might be covering." Yet the most enduring mystery lies in what happened immediately after their final confirmed transmission. Coalition aircraft struck a series of suspected Scud sites near Al-Qaim within 24 hours, but none of the targets yielded definitive evidence of destroyed launchers. Some analysts believe Delta's findings triggered the strikes. Others suggest the team stumbled upon decoys, mock launchers designed to mislead both satellites and scouts. With mission logs incomplete and several key documents still redacted, the true outcome remains debated. What is certain is that the Al-Qaim reconnaissance served as a turning point. It sharpened coalition understanding of Iraq's deception strategies and influenced subsequent covert missions deeper into the Western Desert. But it also raised unresolved questions about what the team encountered, and whether their silence that night concealed more than just radio static. Those questions set the stage for another operation, one even more controversial: the SAS patrol that would soon enter Iraqi territory under the call sign Bravo 20. By late January 1991, as Desert Storm entered its second week, a covert British operation began that would soon become one of the most debated missions of the Gulf War. The spotlight illuminated the mission objective, Operation Bravo 20. There was no turning back now. Yet beneath that official mandate lay a far more sensitive hook. Coalition commanders suspected that Iraqi units were using improvised fiber optic lines buried beneath the desert floor to evade electronic surveillance. Finding these lines required boots on the ground, and the AAS were chosen for their long-range desert warfare expertise. The desert floor became a violent storm of rotor wash and sand as the heavily equipped teams dropped in under the cover of night vision. The area, just south of the H-2 and H-3 air bases, was far more active than expected. with Iraqi patrols using unlit civilian trucks and Bedouin smugglers moving through the same areas the team intended to observe. Their equipment also worked against them. The pre-dawn desert air turned the night's condensation to heavy frost, sealing the scope lens and radio gear in a cold, pale blue silence. A legacy etched in black and white now faces the vivid brutality of the modern front line. The missile trajectory update floods the operations center with urgent light. Every analyst knows the stakes of this single red line. Amid layers of government secrecy, one handwritten plea for urgency cuts through the silence of the archives. Hidden in the shallow OP, we scanned the dusty road for any sign of approaching movement beneath the hazy desert sun. The cold bit deep as the operator wrestled the dying set for a signal. Under the dim red light, he knew the message couldn't wait. They navigated the desolate slope under starlight, every movement measured to ensure the antenna reached its silent deployment point. The analog spool spun, capturing nothing but the harsh hiss of the void before the feed was intentionally severed. The exposed sand confirmed the hiding spot. A moment later, the horizon filled with the fast-moving steel of the enemy convoy. What the desert reveals to the man outside, the archaic radio attempts to confirm inside the surveillance post. Decades of history remain sealed, hidden beneath the thick, purposeful strokes of the sensor's black marker. Under the green glow of NVGs, Iraqi units form a tight defensive perimeter, securing an unknown objective deep in the desert night. Dragging himself into the frozen depression, the operator's breath was a steaming testament to survival beneath the faint, unforgiving moon. The primary extraction route was instantly blocked, forcing a sharp, unplanned diversion directly into the urban zone. A medium reconnaissance view captures the heavily concealed radar vehicle at a forward desert outpost, maintaining silent electronic watch. Identifying operational risk. Case study B20 reveals how vulnerability stems directly from outdated intelligence and unpredictable weather patterns. Radio silence, a fractured sight, and the unforgiving cold signaled the rapid onset of mission failure. Extreme distance and poor visibility obscured the details, confirming only the presence of large, mobile assets moving through the remote exclusion zone. A high-angle reconnaissance shot captures Iraqi soldiers clumsily wrestling giant inflatable mock-ups of military hardware across the desert staging area. As the patrol splintered under Iraqi pursuit and its members faced capture or death, one truth became unavoidable. Bravo 20 had ventured into a region hiding more than mobile launchers. And what the team encountered, what they may have seen but never formally reported, still fuels debate among military historians today. The next forbidden covert operation would push even deeper into Iraq's shadowed interior, where American and British teams sought answers about a suspected chemical weapons site near An-Nasiriyah, an operation shrouded in even tighter secrecy. In the final week of January 1991, as coalition aircraft tightened their grip on Iraq's command and control systems, a quiet directive circulated through a narrow corridor of American and British intelligence. Satellite imagery had revealed unusual activity near a set of industrial warehouses outside Al-Nasiriyah, a city offering strategic access to the Euphrates corridor. The hook was subtle yet alarming. Trucks entering and leaving the site moved only at night, and several showed elevated thermal signatures. Though no definitive evidence indicated the presence of chemical weapons, the pattern resembled earlier dispersal methods used by Iraqi units during the Iran-Iraq War.
The discovery triggered one of the Gulf War's most discreet joint missions, an operation whose existence remains sparsely documented and partially redacted.
The struggle for the men involved began long before boots touched Iraqi soil. The region around al-Nasiriyah was heavily guarded, with Republican Guard units positioned to protect key supply routes feeding the southern front. Aerial reconnaissance could track vehicle patterns, but not determine what lay inside the warehouses. Coalition commanders debated whether to risk a ground insertion. The city's proximity to the front line made the area a potential trap for any small team, yet the intelligence stakes were high. If Iraq possessed chemical munitions near an active war zone, the coalition needed to know, not to strike, but to anticipate. A miscalculation during the ground war phase could expose thousands of troops. One internal CENTCOM memo, now partially declassified, contains a handwritten note in the margin. Ground recon only if absolutely necessary. Eventually, the decision was made. It was necessary. A small detachment composed of U.S. Army Special Forces operators and 2 SAS liaison specialists was selected for the mission. Their insertion point was miles from the suspected site, requiring a long foot approach across flat terrain exposed to observation. Low through the moonlit shadows of the canal, the patrol pressed forward, their silent movement betrayed only by the chemical detector's faint, uneasy green light. Importantly, they were under strict orders to avoid engagement unless unavoidable. This was intelligence gathering, not direct action. Historical context adds weight to their cautious advance. During the 1980s, Iraq had developed multiple storage and production facilities associated with chemical warfare agents, though many had been damaged or abandoned by 1991. Still, coalition analysts feared that remnants of those stockpiles might be relocated into civilian structures to deter airstrikes. Such fears were not unfounded. Declassified UN inspection records from the post-war period later revealed cases where dual-use equipment had been dispersed to remote warehouses to avoid detection. Whether this occurred near al-Nasiriyah during Desert Storm remains unproven, but at the time, the possibility was enough to launch a covert insertion. The reveal came as the team reached the perimeter of the industrial site shortly before dawn. What they found challenged previous assumptions. Several buildings were warm on thermal scopes, too warm for unoccupied structures in winter conditions. Yet there were no visible guards, no heavy machinery, and no clear signs of recent large-scale military activity. A Special Forces operator recorded in his mission notes, "Site active but quiet. Patterns don't match known munitions storage." The team captured infrared imagery and collected soil samples near drainage outlets. The readings were inconclusive. No chemical agent markers registered. Yet, anomalies in the heat patterns suggested rapid movement inside the warehouses in the hours before their arrival. The most perplexing evidence surfaced during a sweep of the outer perimeter, tire tracks running in parallel sets, suggesting the presence of multiple vehicles with similar wheel spacing, possibly military trucks. But the tracks abruptly vanished on hard-packed ground behind the facility. Analysts later theorized that vehicles might have been repositioned quickly the night before the team arrived. Another explanation is simpler. The site may have been part of a mobile logistics operation unrelated to chemical weapons. Still, the timing of the activity, occurring within hours of coalition aircraft passing overhead, raised questions that were never fully resolved. The modern lesson from this operation is one echoed by intelligence professionals today. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The Gulf War's rapid tempo made it difficult to distinguish between legitimate industrial activity and concealed military operations. Even highly trained teams, equipped with sophisticated tools, could only observe snapshots in a constantly shifting environment. War compresses information, distorts patterns, and leaves behind fragments that analysts must puzzle together long after the dust settles. Yet the site near An-Nasiriyah was never conclusively linked to chemical weapons, and the team withdrew before sunrise with limited but valuable intelligence. Their extraction was uneventful, quiet, efficient, and unacknowledged in official communiques. The mission's ambiguity remains its legacy. What was inside those warehouses? Routine materials hastily moved, or remnants of a program hidden from view? The unanswered questions of the An-Nasiriyah operation sharpened coalition attention toward Iraq's deeper logistical networks. And soon, American reconnaissance units would act on a new lead, one buried in a bunker complex near the Wadi al-Batin, where another covert sweep would uncover documents that deepened, rather than solved, the mysteries of Iraq's wartime planning. In the closing days of January 1991, as coalition ground forces prepared for the inevitable push into Kuwait, U.S. intelligence analysts detected faint but intriguing signals emanating from a cluster of bunkers north of Wadi al-Batin. The hook came from a pattern buried deep within intercepted Iraqi communications, brief, encrypted bursts that did not match the usual chatter of frontline units. The transmissions were short, disciplined, and precise, characteristics more typical of command elements than of regular soldiers. The bunker complex, surrounded by sandburns and low ridgelines, had been photographed before, but analysts noted subtle changes in vehicle tracks and power signatures. Something had shifted.
And so, a small element of U.S. Marine Force Recon was tasked with a mission that, while never publicly acknowledged, would later haunt intelligence circles for its unanswered questions. Their struggle began even before they crossed into the target area. The Wadi al-Batin, dry, winding, and deceptively open, had served as a natural corridor for Iraqi patrols since the earliest days of the conflict. While the Marines trained extensively in desert infiltration, the terrain here posed a different kind of challenge. A vast amphitheater of sand, where sound carried too easily, and movement could be spotted from miles away. The Force Recon team moved under the cover of deep night, the moon obscured by drifting cloud layers. They carried M16A2 rifles with suppressed attachments, PRC-117G radios, night vision optics, and small explosive charges in case the mission expanded beyond reconnaissance. But their objective was clear: enter the bunker system quietly, document whatever was inside, and withdraw without detection. Historical context paints the urgency behind this operation. By late January, coalition leaders feared Iraq would attempt a final, desperate defense using entrenched bunker systems along potential invasion routes. Satellite photos had already shown Iraq constructing decoy positions, dummy bunkers made of plywood and sandbags to distort coalition battle planning. But the layout near Wadi al-Batin was different. The hardened structures were older, built during earlier border tensions, and connected by underground corridors rarely seen outside of major Iraqi command hubs. Commanders suspected these bunkers to conceal either brigade-level planning documents or equipment linked to Iraq's defensive network, stretching toward the Saddam Line fortifications. The Force Recon team's approach revealed the first signs that the complex was not abandoned as previously assumed. A faint glow, only visible through thermal sights, seeped through a ventilation shaft on the largest bunker. Generators were running, though quietly, and a thin plume of heat dissipated into the cold night air. Inside the main entrance, footprints suggested recent activity, but the patterns were inconsistent. Some prints matched standard Iraqi boots. Others did not.
Mixed traffic, one Marine noted in his mission log, possibly technical staff. This entry, declassified only years later, remains a key point of debate among analysts. The reveal came deeper inside the complex. In a side room that appeared hastily evacuated, the Marines found a metal desk covered with maps, detailed hand-drawn sketches of defensive arrays stretching across southern Iraq. These maps referenced artillery placements, communication relays, and fallback lines never reported in standard Iraqi doctrine. More intriguing were the documents stacked beside them, sheets of encrypted grid coordinates and notes written in what appeared to be two distinct handwriting styles, suggesting collaboration between different units or different organizations altogether. Not routine planning materials, the Marine recorder noted. Someone wanted this hidden. The team photographed everything they could: diagrams of trench networks, symbols indicating anti-air assets, and grid codes whose meaning even intelligence specialists would later struggle to decipher. But the moment that still puzzles historians emerged when they entered the final chamber. There, the Marines found a sealed metal container, lightweight, portable, and marked only with faded stenciling. Inside were fragments of radio equipment, spare battery units, and what looked like encoded frequency lists. None of it matched the gear typically used by regular Iraqi forces. Whether the equipment belonged to a specialized Iraqi technical unit or to foreign advisors remains an unresolved question. No identifying markings survived. The modern lesson from this operation speaks to the fog of war within intelligence work. Not everything discovered can be cleanly interpreted. War zones produce data, massive amounts of it, but interpreting that data in real time is fraught with uncertainty. The Force Recon team had expected to find evidence of routine defensive planning. Instead, they uncovered fragments of something more intricate, possibly a command node coordinating Iraqi deception efforts, or an improvised hub for rapid response communications. Under the blue hour of the desert dawn, operatives race the sunrise to extract sensitive materials from the Al-Batin perimeter. Their radio call sign never appeared in the day's operational summaries. No mention of the bunker sweep made it into press briefings, and to this day, several pages from the original mission packet remain redacted. The unanswered questions left lingering by the Wadi al-Batin discovery pushed analysts to look beyond static defense lines and consider Iraq's broader wartime strategy, one that blended deception, mobility, and shadow communications. It was this evolving understanding that set the stage for the final covert operation of the war, where missing intelligence records and vanished radio traffic would spark the greatest mystery of Desert Storm. As February 1991 approached and coalition forces prepared for the ground assault that would ultimately liberate Kuwait, a quieter narrative was unfolding beneath the surface, one that would leave more questions than answers in the official record of the Gulf War. The hook emerged from a curious pattern noticed by analysts reviewing real-time intelligence logs, a series of missing or incomplete transmissions associated with several covert teams operating deep in Iraq. These radio gaps, some lasting minutes, others hours, did not align with normal atmospheric interference or routine communication delays. They suggested something else, something unrecorded. And it was this mystery that drove the final and perhaps most enigmatic covert operation of Desert Storm. The struggle began when one of CENTCOM's Special Operations Liaison officers flagged a discrepancy in a mission tracking ledger. A Delta Force patrol operating near the western Iraqi deserts and a joint US-UK element surveying suspected Scud corridors both showed missing entries for the same 4-hour window, despite being hundreds of miles apart.
Ordinarily, such omissions could be attributed to radio discipline or low visibility, but the coincidence nagged at analysts. Why would two unrelated teams go silent simultaneously during a period of heightened Iraqi military activity?
In an attempt to reconcile the missing data, a small intelligence cell at Riyadh Air Base launched a cross-check of all intercepted Iraqi communications from that night. The results deepened the mystery. Iraqi units in multiple sectors reported unknown movement and unverified signals on their local networks, phrases rarely found in Iraqi transmissions, which tended to be rigid and literal. One decrypted fragment noted, "Activity west of corridor, unidentified." Another referred to possible enemy sensors without specifying location. The ambiguity was startling. Iraq's military was not prone to vague language in its reporting.
The insight came from a retired intelligence officer, serving as an advisor during the war, who pointed out that similar irregularities had appeared years earlier during Iran-Iraq border skirmishes. At that time, Iraqi units sometimes referred to unusual communications anomalies when Iranian reconnaissance teams were operating unexpectedly close. The implication was unsettling. Coalition special operations teams, possibly operating deeper than officially acknowledged, might have triggered a series of Iraqi alerts that never fully reached coalition command logs due to either malfunction, misrouting, or deliberate filtering by unknown intermediaries. One marginal note in a daily intelligence summary, now partially declassified, reads, "Unclear whether teams were where logs indicate." Under the steady hum and red light of the cockpit, dedicated operators maintain absolute focus on the vital data scrolling across their consoles. It was extremely short, less than a second, but directional analysis placed the signal near an area where no friendly units were officially authorized to operate. The signal didn't match Iraqi formats either. The recording was archived, marked as unresolved, and quietly moved into a restricted file. Only fragments of the incident survive in redacted summaries. Historians reviewing those remnants still debate whether the signal belonged to a misconfigured coalition radio, a malfunction, or something else entirely. The modern lesson in this final covert chapter is one that intelligence communities still grapple with. In war, the absence of complete data can create narratives of its own. When missions are compartmentalized, when units are dispersed across hostile terrain, and when communication lines are strained by weather, distance, and secrecy, gaps in the record become inevitable. But in the case of Desert Storm, these gaps occurred often enough and clustered strangely enough to suggest that certain movements, encounters, or discoveries may have been intentionally withheld or never formally documented. The emotional weight of this ambiguity did not fall on analysts alone. Veterans of several covert teams later expressed unease about operations they felt were never fully acknowledged. One Delta operator remarked in a post-war interview, "There were places we went that never made it into the books, not because they were failures, but because no one wanted them written down." Another SAS liaison described moments of radio silence that didn't feel accidental, hinting at unknown factors on the battlefield that complicated their routes and timing. The remaining unresolved question, the one that lingers like a desert horizon at dusk, is what exactly these covert teams encountered during those unaccounted windows of their missions. While vital communications fall, the military convoy races towards its obscured objective under the harsh light of the Middle Eastern conflict. The confidential archives conceal the history, yet the clear map exposes the immediate future of the operation. Intentional degradation protects their identities and the mission details. What remains is a heavily blurred artifact, suggesting a truth we are not meant to access.
And so the Gulf War closed with a paradox. The coalition achieved overwhelming military success, but the forbidden covert ops conducted in the deserts of Iraq left behind a trail of mysteries still studied today.
The only evidence remaining, a distorted voice, a partial map, and a final hurried entry, preserved under the focused light of history.